Hi guys, we are back, and we are back with some other material and other ways of looking at things. And I just want to hand it over to Milena, that is going to share a few slides with us and take this conversation maybe broader. Over to you, Milena.
Thank you so much. Starting here. So what I wanted to start today's discussion with is with a brief presentation that introduces the concept of cost flipping and illustrates how it works in other socioeconomic contexts. And the reason that I'm going to do that is that in this group, we actually had previous discussions and were wondering whether something like that could work in tourism and be applicable to the context that we have here. So let's begin. I will use an example from healthcare to illustrate what cost flipping is. So we all know that smoking is one of the most health damaging activities that people voluntarily engage in, and that under typical social design, they have the freedom to do so and are of course incentivized by the market forces that currently exist. What this leads to is increased health damage to society, and as a result requires increased cost for supporting care for patients with tobacco-evoked health problems, in addition to an unhealthy share of the population. We have unpredictable costs, which can vary depending on how sick people get as a result of smoking, how long it takes for them to recover, or to undergo treatment. Now, what if we flip this and pull some of these costs that end up in treatment, we pull them up front and pay people who would typically smoke not to do so. By paying them, we directly manipulate the likelihood that they will engage in this unhealthy habit, and as a result, achieve no or maybe a smaller share of people with tobacco-related health problems, as well as some cost savings, simply because we haven't had to deal with these health-related problems. So in essence, with cost flipping, we seek the opportunities to avoid some of that significant cost to society by flipping the point of the investment and making it upfront to avoid the undesired effects rather than having to pay the costs of managing the negative impact later. In the case of smoking, we also generate impacts that go beyond the finances because in addition to the increased and unpredictable cost of managing the negative health outcomes, we also have the cost of having a less healthy population. So by flipping the cost into an upfront investment, we minimize the pure cost of the problem, as well as we gain wellness benefits for the entire society and as the economy. So experiments with such models have been conducted in the area of healthcare. And so I'll summarize the big picture of one specific study that was conducted in the UK, where it was estimated that such a cost flipping approach produces pure cost savings of up to 15% in the system. And up to 85% of additional savings, simply because this upfront investment actually ends up generating wellness or quality of life benefits that are much more significant than what 9/10 of treatment, of costs for treatment would actually generate. So you can see that ultimately the results are quite significant. So as we were discussing with this group, we started wondering whether something similar could work in tourism. And here's an example of what we started discussing. Could that work in travel? For example, let's take the problem with waste. We all know that when a destination sees growth in its tourism economy, this ultimately leads to generation or increased generation of waste whether it's single-use plastics or other, this pushes the costs that are required to manage that waste and to clean up nature, which inevitably ends up being polluted. But what if there's a way to flip that cost and prepay or make a preliminary investment to avoid the initial creation of waste altogether? That would leave us with clean nature, opportunities to continue extracting the wellness benefits from nature, both for residents and for guests, and cost savings because we no longer have to keep increasing the cost of waste management. So by flipping the cost from a cost managing for managing negative impacts to an investment in preventing the negative outcomes altogether, we end up with a combination of monetary and non-monetary benefits, just like with the smoking example. Similar approach could be taken to air cleanliness, where we could avoid the cost of managing the negative outcomes of increased traffic by investing in preventing it altogether, and thus gaining monetary savings along with environmental benefits and health benefits. So with this quick overview, I would like to open the question about whether this group thinks that there's place for cost flipping in our industry, especially now that we have the opportunity to build tourism back better. What do you think?
I think it's an interesting approach, and in Norway we have seen some initiatives doing some of the things you mentioned, Milena. There was last year an initiative taken by the Norwegian Trekking Association, DNT. They found that some of the the signature hikes in Norway, Besseggen, where you go through the mountains, it's a difficult place for parking. It's expensive to build out parking lots for private cars. So they took an initiative where they said that if you take the bus to the mountains from Oslo or from wherever you live, you will get the bus ticket will serve as a kind of gift voucher. So if you take the bus, you can use this bus ticket and get a meal or partly a meal, or 100 NOKs, 100 Norwegian kroner, this gift voucher you could use at the lodges or restaurants that this trekking association has. And they wanted to stimulate the people to go in a more environmental friendly way to the mountains. This was before the corona, so bus was very, instead of driving your own car, you should take the bus. And then they saw that already the first year, maybe between 3,000 and 5,000 people who wanted to go to this hike, they used the bus more than earlier years. 3,000 to 5,000 more people used the bus to the mountains, and was encouraged by this gift voucher that they would get. So I think this is possible, and it's very expensive to build up big parking lots in this area in the Jotunheimen. So it could, if it could limit the numbers of private cars going there, it would be probably, like Milena used as an example, it would be cost saving as well. So I think this is interesting.
This is really interesting. And now when we are restarting everything and restarting tourism in a way, we have so many new opportunities and new ways of thinking about, I mean, what is the best way to manage? What is the best way? I mean, now we kind of know more about the capacity of the nature and how to manage people in and out. And now we are allowed to make new decisions that we wanted maybe to do before, but everything was going so fast and growing so fast. So maybe it was hard just to stop then. So I think that this is a great example, and I think also what you just went over, Milena, it's really good to put this in perspective, that we know already and that has been working, you know. So in the mindset, it comes much clearer what we are thinking about when we are talking about this. But what do you say, Daniel or Sina?
I can start. So Sina will make some sense of this later. But I think, at least I think I just have also started to think about so many different examples after we have had these discussions. Both examples that already exist. Maybe some of these are not made from like purpose, but I think there are quite a lot of these things going on by purpose, but we don't maybe make it as clear. I think just this concept of cost flipping could be made much clearer. And also when we talk about costs, it is not only about economical, you know, costs. Now you drink kranavatten, I see, Asta Kristin. That was very fit because I thought about that as an example where you in Iceland could give away water bottles, for example, to people, visitors to Iceland. Instead of buying bottled water, you get the water bottle, and that is, of course, some will cost money, but it will save costs on you know, wastes that will go into nature otherwise, and you will save money that you don't need to buy the water, because in Iceland the best water is what you get in the kranavatten, is like the tap water. So that is just one example, but we are also in a time where during this pandemic I have never seen so many like there is so much open-minded efforts on doing experimentation now. And for example, in Iceland, there is an experimentation almost going on when opening the borders, and see how that will work with testing people and who will pay for that. Is it the government, or in the end will it be the tourists themselves or the tour operators? That is just another example. And so many other examples going on that we have seen, and not only connected to tourists, but it's like, if we could make sense of this in a way like we talked about now, and the slides that you have helped us put together, Milena, I think they are so clearly explaining this concept, and that is the key. We need to make it as simple as possible to understand, because I think many politicians and decision makers know that we are not handling in the smartest way as it is many times. But we need to make the complex more uncomplex, and make more people understand this and work together as this. So now, Signe, now you can make some sense of what I said.
I think you're very good at making the complex less complex. I think it makes really good sense, and there are many very interesting perspectives to it. And of course, one of the sort of first things, I mean, in the situation we've been in, I think it's become very apparent that there are different kinds of setups and different ways of funding tourism, and some is more resilient than others, and some ways of funding allows for more long-term thinking, whereas other ways of funding have been very hard hit by this crisis. So I think one of the first things that I thought of when you first presented this concept or this idea, Milena, was of course tourism taxes, because I think we have a tendency to put that in a pile of one thing, but in fact they are very, very diverse, and there are many different kinds, and especially the design behind those taxes is quite different, right? So I think one of the examples that is often highlighted is the Balearic Islands, that have a design where the tourism tax goes into a fund for sustainable tourism initiatives, right? So and that's, the way that you put it, it's rather than preventing the negative impact, it's investing in the positive development. And I think that's in many ways a key example on how to do that. Not saying that taxes is the only way to do it, but I think it is an interesting example. And then as you say, Daniel, coming out of the crisis, I think we've seen examples now. Also, we've discussed who has the cost of preventing the spread of the coronavirus, or who takes that cost, and can that be flipped also in a positive sense? Is it the tourists themselves that have to pay to be in quarantine, or is it the destination that offers it? And so I think that there are many different, we're currently in a period where we're experimenting with who pays what and how do we do it, and who takes the sort of the risk or the burden of this, and who doesn't. And so this is the right time to have a discussion like this that allows us to be more foresighted and long-term thinking, I think.
Can I have a comment on that? Because on a practical level as well, we have one other example in Norway as well, because like you say, Signe, it's one thing is to have, we have these costs, for instance, with waste. And then we talk about how do we get tourism taxes so we can pay for that collection of that waste. The other way of thinking, there was another initiative in Norway. They say that, okay, when you leave the parking lot to go into one of the classic hikes in Norway, Trolltunga, the Troll's Tongue, that's a 7-hour walk, and it's no infrastructure in there. So it's very expensive to bring out the waste from people. So they started to say, okay, we support you with a special bag. If you collect your own waste along the trip and bring it back yourself, instead of throwing it somewhere or leaving it somewhere in the mountains and somebody else has to pick it up, you bring it back to the parking lot, and then you get waffles and tea or coffee for free and then they automatically collect the garbage, and that's much cheaper. So you don't need to say you have to pay a tourist tax, because we need to go in there to collect that garbage that you have left. Instead, if you bring it back, it's a better solution for both. I think there's a lot of, that's a concrete example, but I think it's a lot of things we can do this way in tourism.
I think that's brilliant. And also that you get the feeling that you're doing good. You're not, I mean, you don't get any bad things to happen to you if you don't do it, but you get rewarded if you do it. So that's a really good thing to start with.
Yeah, it is leave no trace thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant.
I also wanted to add something that I think was important that Daniel highlighted, and that's the fact that really we're moving towards thinking about societies and economies that don't measure everything with monetary indicators, but that also take into account the non-monetary impacts and dynamics, such as the wellness of people, whether it's residents or guests and so on. But this is becoming more and more important. The advanced societies are accounting for that. So to me, the tourism sector should be moving towards that thinking. And this is a good example of doing that. And the second thing is that really these seemingly non-economic impacts, such as impact on wellness, impact on nature, all of these ultimately turn into costs for society, because ultimately societies have to manage the outcomes of having poor health, having poor nature, or depletion of resources, and so on. So this thinking, or putting into the equations the non-monetary factors, is, I think, really very important.
So what do you think would be the best way to take this forward? I mean, this is on a government level, obviously, but also the industry must be really willing, because like Signe said, I mean, it must not come out as one other tax of,
but it is, as you say, it is a governmental thing to do, but sometimes I think, especially during these times, I have seen, and we have seen, examples on how it has become political matters on how you are acting, for example, or if it is up on the experts. And of course, I come from Sweden. It has been a lot of talk about Sweden. I don't just now that is out for me, but of course it is what is most important in these types is we cannot only put it on one stakeholder. And that is exactly how we have done it with, if you work with destination management for real, it is a responsibility that is divided on all stakeholders together, and that you are work with destination management for real. And now we are almost like working with destination management for the world, talking about this now. And what do we need to do that? Of course, we need to work towards private and public sectors. We need to work towards governments, but the governments also need to understand the power of people. And people, planet, and profit is something that has been up for a long time. But the people, how are people connected to all of this? How are people connected to understanding this, as we talk about today, coast flipping? Why is that just on a level up here, and then people will just follow what someone else is telling you instead of making common, understanding about things? And what solutions could we see where we explain this kind of ways of like nudging ourselves and everyone to act in a better way? Because I think all of us want to act in a better way, and we need to get the tools to help us doing that. One way is, of course, to make it more visible on the economical benefits, the environmental benefits, the social benefits, and how could we do that? Like, how can we display better on, by doing this, we will better take care of this place that we have just here. And I think there are many clever ways that we have seen how that could work, like how you are, by acting in a way, as you were talking about, getting something back board, or if it is also like you could somehow change the colors in a city center into green, if it is like, now we are working in a good way. That's, everyone is understanding like, yeah, we are doing good, or something like that. We need to do more for getting more signals to, we are doing it in a good way.
I think also, like, from the pandemic crisis, we've also seen, of course, closing down borders and travel restrictions and all these things are, of course, governmental level. But there's also been a very strong sort of expectation that industry, that brands would take responsibility as well and do whatever they could to support at least the governmental or the national priorities. So you could transfer that mindset into this and say, well, then, with the right examples or the right way of thinking, you could actually also have the industry as part of something like this, flipping the cost. What came to mind was the campaign that Thai Airways did as part of, during the crisis, they shifted their loyalty scheme. And so by allowing them access to where you were going or how far you were moving away from your home, you could earn bonus points by staying at home as much as possible. And then, of course, later when borders are lifted again, you can use those points to fly with Thai Airways. But I think it's still sort of, the brands are taking responsibility, and they've done this throughout the Corona crisis. I think moving forward, you could easily, not easily, but you could see governmental pressure to, to set those priorities for building back better. And what does it mean, cost flipping, but then also, maybe enabling the industry to support that with initiatives like this. So you could almost like nudge the behavior in the direction that you would want. And because I think there's also, when it all comes down to it, hopefully in the future, brand wise, you won't be acceptable unless you support an agenda of building that and developing more sustainable tourism, making tourism a positive contributor to the overall sustainability agenda. So, much like we've seen throughout this crisis, where you couldn't be a brand that didn't care.
Absolutely.
So hopefully in the coming, now we have the new generations that are the future travelers, and the future is really not that far away. So hopefully they will set that agenda for brands as well.
Yeah.
I would like Asta, I would like to see a lot of initiatives, like Daniel says, on a local level or destination level, or like Signe says, within companies, in order to look at these cost flipping opportunities. Because if we wait for the government to do something about it, it's going to take a lot of time. So these examples that I mentioned from Norway, one is, as far as I remember, from a municipality, Trolltunga, and the other one is from this trekking, ideal organization, the Trekking Association, together with a foundation that promotes responsible tourism wherever Norwegians go. So they paid for this with their own money.
Yeah.
But then it becomes a showcase that could be discussed and maybe done something with on a higher level, in a region or in a national setting.
And I think it would be a really good for us now, because we speak a lot together. We don't always record what we are talking about, but we did it this time because we thought it should go out there, and that is actually what we are hoping for, that you that are out there and listening come back to us with good examples like we know, and to add to this conversation. So we will like fast track this. We must act now, because like Signe just said, the future is not like waiting for us. It's just here, and we need to do better the other time around. So I think that should maybe just be our final remarks for now, to shout out and ask people to react on this, and join forces with us in the cost flipping period. What do you say about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Become
like
a
that.
cost flipper.
Yeah,
I want encourage everyone to prototype more. Like I think in the design process, yes, everyone are prototyping more. Normally it comes quite much from the private side, with new appears a lot of new products and processes that have not been there before, and we don't know what will happen from them. But then in the end it will be taken care of. It will lead us forward instead of stagnation. We just want these examples. So I think we want to collect these kind of examples from all kind of perspectives. It could be connected to tourism. It could be connected to public health. It could be connected to anything. So let's collect on these stories and see how we can use them, and encouraging more of this. So
so maybe there will be a Norwegian cost flipping movement around very soon.
Yeah.
But so and also I think it's really important to have this conversation now, or at least start it now, because you see a lot of cost flipping initiatives actually going on, but maybe flipping it in the wrong direction, or at least it's a question, right? I mean, because we're so eager to bring back what we've lost over the summer. So loads of initiatives that offer things for free. And I think this conversation is also a discussion of, will that work? And is it the long-term solution to do it like that? And so on. So I think that's why it's also very important to start this conversation now, because we need to think long-term.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. So thanks for now, guys.
Thank you.